guess what? You don't have to go looking for suffering. It's going to find you.
Right.
And it's going to find everybody listening to us and watching us, because suffering is part of life. The key thing to understand is that when suffering inevitably happens, you got two choices. You can run away from it, you can deny it, you can try to make it go away, or you can learn from it and grow from it.
I have a team of people who just book guests for my show. So it is pretty rare that I go and like dig and find a website and find an email address and track people down and harass. And I have been sending notes to your team for a while now.
And they didn't get through?
No, they did.
Oh, okay.
It was just to line up with your schedule.
Oh, I
so
see.
I am so tickled that you're here.
Oh, me too.
Because as soon as I read the first, was that your first book?
That was my 12th book, but I read a lot of bad books first.
Okay,
Yeah.
Same. This is my same story. Nobody knew about me
like
till my
5
sixth
warm-up
book.
books
Yes, same. Well, so I read your 12th book or your 22nd book because my boyfriend read it and then recommended it to me. And I told you when we were walking through the house, like within 2 days, I was like, you got to read this. You know,
kidding.
take
I'm
this
so glad
book.
to hear that.
Yeah. So
happy.
Can you tell a bit about the impetus for that book and
Yeah.
the lessons that we find inside of it?
Yeah, so I write, teach, and speak about happiness, about the science of happiness. I'm a social scientist, and I know almost everybody who does the neuroscience and social science of happiness, and what they all have in common is that they want it. I mean, everybody wants to be happier, but people who have a social science toolkit and who feel a happiness deficit, these are the people who specialize in happiness, and that was my case too. Happiness is hard for me. It's not like horrible. It's not like nobody needs to, call 911, but it's not, I'm lower in positive affect and higher in negative affect than a lot of people.
Meaning that you tend to gravitate more towards negativity?
Yeah.
Or pessimism?
Well, it's not even pessimism. It's melancholia, as they used to say in the Middle Ages.
Yes.
It's just kind of sort of a blue outlook. And look, I come from gloomy parents and gloomy grandparents, and half of your baseline happiness is genetic. We actually know this from identical twin studies where identical twins are separated at birth and adopted into separate families. So it's a statistical test. It's not done on purpose. That would be unethical, obviously.
Except for that one documentary with the triplets.
Yeah.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Really upsetting. Sorry.
I know. What, you mean the 3 Identical Strangers? That one?
Yes.
Yeah,
where
the 3 brothers?
Yes. And
super heavy.
Yeah.
Super heavy.
Yeah.
I know. And it turns out that they all have the same set of psychiatric conditions, et cetera, because these things are largely inherited.
Yeah.
Between 40 and 80% of every personality characteristic is genetic, and your baseline mood is half genetic. And so that means it's super important to understand that so you can manage your genetics. I mean, half of your tendency toward alcoholism and drug abuse is genetic too.
Yeah, for sure.
But all that means is that you need better habits. If you've got a proclivity toward it, I've got this super technology for turning that to zero. It's called don't drink. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true for your happiness. If it turns out you've got gloomy parents, you should study happiness so that you can have the right kind of habits. And so I, realizing that maybe a little later than I should have in my 40s, I'm like, I'm going to turn my toolkit on this thing. Well, it's my wife. She's like, don't you have a PhD? Why aren't you using it, for something useful, like not making me miserable?
Yeah.
And so I actually turned the whole toolkit toward trying to understand what kind of a strategy I could put together for my own life so that I could live happier and share these ideas with other people. And I changed my career completely. I was a CEO of a think tank, a big nonprofit think tank in Washington, D.C., and I quit my job. And
At what age were you?
I took that job when I was 44, and I quit when I was 55. And in the last 7 years of that, I was writing a personal research-based science plan for getting happier for me. And I had this big envelope of notes and notebooks, and Esther, my wife, found it. She's like, "This is a book." It's not the kind of stuff I write books about. She said, I think somebody might be interested in this.
Yeah.
And I published it. It was From Strength to Strength, about how you can get happier as the years go by. And it turned out to be something that people wanted to read. And I became so enthusiastic about it. I said, this is not right for me to keep doing something else and have this be my personal plan. I want to write, speak, and teach about this for literally the rest of my life. I mean, I rewrote my personal mission statement, which is I want to use science and ideas to lift people up and bring them together in bonds of happiness and love. That's what I want to do, and I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. And so I left in 2019, and I've been teaching at Harvard and writing in the Atlantic and writing books and talking about the thing that people really want the most, which is getting happier.
Do you feel like is the data skewed in any direction for men who are over 40 versus women who are over 40?
There are differences for
Yeah.
sure. Traditionally, men and women have had happiness differences. Traditionally, women are happier than men, is what we find in almost every category. So if you look at marriage, you find that married women are happier than married men, that single women are happier than single men. Widowed women are way happier than widowed men. It's like my wife looked at that one, she's like, huh. The only group of women that tend to be less happy are divorced women who have kids in the home, because it's incredibly stressful. It's just tons of work. Isn't that right, Rachel?
I don't know anything about that.
I know, it's like
As our sweet housekeeper, who I literally don't know how we'd live without, this morning I think could tell I was very stressed. I have 4 kids and each of them go to a different school.
Oh, nice.
And this was the first week back at school.
Yeah.
So just trying to navigate how everyone would get to school today
Right.
was like, oh, it was
like
miracle.
Operation Desert Storm,
It
right?
was, yeah. And I came back and I was sort of standing at the kitchen counter like, okay, we did this. We're fine. And she looked at me and she said, I know you don't want to hear this, but it really does go so fast. And people used to tell me that when my kids were young. And I used to tell them back that they had no idea what they were talking about because they didn't know how hard it felt for me. And she said, it doesn't mean that this moment isn't hard for you, but it is precious.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you.
I know. Well, part of it is, and I actually, it's one of the things that I study in my work. And you find that when your kids are little and there's a lot of stress and you're pursuing a career and moving and all the things that you do, especially if you're single, that you're trading off a lot of enjoyment for meaning. So your life has more and more and more meaning, but less and less and less enjoyment. And that's one of the reasons in your 30s and 40s it can be so difficult, and moment-to-moment happiness can be hard to come by. That's one of the reasons. And, it's funny because, I remember in those years, I mean, my wife did a lot more than I did in bringing up the kids because I was always working. I was running a company or whatever. But I tried to be home as much as possible, and it was stressful. It really was stressful. And then it's weird because they grew up. Now I'm a grandfather.
Are you really? How's that?
Different.
Yeah.
So it's the same. It's weird. It's like, it's better.
Yeah, I'm sure you could give them back to somebody.
I know. It's really, really great. And I didn't sort of think that was going to happen, but of course it does because they grow up. And my kids got married young. I have my 25 and 23-year-old sons are both married.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my 20-year-old daughter's not married yet.
Yeah.
But who also is adopted, by the way.
Cool.
Like your youngest too.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of a sensation, but I'm more conscious of the fact that that's going to go fast. So it's because there's less pressure, and so there's more moment-to-moment happiness and more meaning. So you're going to love it when the time comes.
I didn't mean to interrupt,
no.
but can you explain what you mean? What's the difference between happiness and moment-to-moment happiness?
Well, it's the happiness that you're experiencing right now versus over the arc of your life.
Got it.
So what you'll say is, so I could ask you 2 questions like, Rachel, how happy are you this morning? Or I could say, how happy are you this year?
Yeah.
Or how happy is this decade? And you'd have to think about all 3 of them in different ways. You could answer the first one most sort of like that.
Yeah.
You'd say like, Nyeh.
Yeah.
It's like, and this year it would be something you'd be thinking about the events of this year. You moved.
Of course.
Really, really stressful, but you're living in a place where you really want to live. And so you'd be thinking about the
Yes.
sums, like the cost and benefits. And this decade, like, been a crazy decade for Rachel Hollis.
Yeah, it has.
And so you'd have to think about that. You'd have to think, it's like there's kind of the party line on how happy I should be, and there's the happiness that I am enjoying.
Yeah.
And that's how we'd go into that if we were trying to calculate that one.
Well, and what's the difference between contentment and happiness?
Contentment, see, the funny thing about happiness, there's so many words around it.
Right.
So let's sort of define the terms. So happiness is basically a combination of 3 things. It's sort of the macronutrient profile of happiness. So if you're going to do your macros in food, it's protein, carbohydrates, and fat. The macronutrients of happiness are enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. These are the 3 parts of happiness.
I guess I'm really happy then.
Yeah, because you've got those 3 things.
Those 3 things.
Yeah, and contentment is really it's kind of the convergence of satisfaction and meaning in your life, satisfaction and purpose in your life. Enjoyment is interesting because enjoyment is actually hard to get. Most people will stop at pleasure, and pleasure never brings happiness. Pleasure is this limbic phenomenon. It's this neurophysiological phenomenon. It's a signal to you that it's going to help you survive and pass on your genes, but it will never lead to happiness because it's fleeting.
Pleasure never
No,
brings happiness.
it does not. What you need is pleasure plus people plus memory. So for example, if there's something gives you pleasure but you're alone, it's a problem, because that will lead to addiction and won't lead to happiness.
Whoa, that's so good.
Yeah, and so that's why Anheuser-Busch doesn't do an ad for beer that shows a guy
One guy
pounding a 12-pack alone in his
alone.
apartment,
You're
because
so
that's
right.
pleasure, and that will not bring that guy happiness.
Right.
But in the ad, the guy is drinking a beer with his brother and friends, and they're
on
having
a
a great
fishing
time and
trip.
loving each other on a
Yeah.
fishing trip and making a memory.
Yes.
Pleasure plus people plus memory equals enjoyment, and that leads to happiness.
Oh my God. I actually didn't know this is something that could be broken down in this way, but obviously it can.
Yeah. These are the equations. I do this on all the components of happiness because my job is to teach people how to get more of it. And so you can't just be like, yeah, it's a thing. You can't be really philosophical about it. You got to be
Right.
very specific about
Right.
it. And each one of the macronutrients of happiness has a formula like this, and you can check yourself to know whether you've got the right strategy in your life.
And then is it as simple as just add more of those types of moments?
Well, yeah. So most people, I can usually diagnose what's going wrong in people's lives if they have lots and lots of pleasure, but not enough people and memories in their life. I can actually say you're going toward addiction. You don't need to get rid of these sources of pleasure. You need to dial them down and put in more opportunities to be sociable, to be in communion with other people, and to be more conscious of what you're doing, such that you can be engaging the prefrontal cortex of your brain and not just your lizard brain. Wow. Lizard brain says, beer feel good.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not the way to consume it. Now, some people, they will wire their brains, their dopaminergic pathways, the neuromodulators in their brain, so that they have to hit the pleasure lever again and again and again and again. And those are the people who have to stop doing that and to not use that source of pleasure ever again, because they get, frankly, too good at it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of neuroscience that goes into this whole thing too.
So I'm thinking in terms of someone right now who heard this and realizes, wow, I get my pleasure from food. Like I'm doing it by myself. I'm doing sort of the exact things that you're describing. For someone who might be having that awareness right now, what does it look like to add people and memory to that experience so they're experiencing the pleasure but not in a way that's becoming something negative for them?
Yeah, so the way to do it is to think a strategy of adding as opposed to subtraction.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of cases you have to subtract. I mean, if people eat to excess and it's really bad for their bodies, then they need to actually tighten up their diet for sure, but that's kind of obvious.
Right.
The way to think about it in a way that's not punitive and that's not negative is to say, I have a rule, except under extraordinary circumstances, I never eat alone. I don't eat alone. Now, some people live alone, so what are you going to do? You know, I saw this book called Microwave Cooking for One.
Oh,
I almost started
God.
crying when I heard it. I was like,
no.
But I get
At least
it.
use the stove.
I know. I'm alone a lot because I'm on the road, and I'm not always traveling with, and you know what it's like when you're on the road alone. And there's sometimes when it's just really, really refreshing to go to a restaurant and eat and think and et cetera. But as a rule, I'm not gonna eat the most delicious foods by myself. I'm gonna have a rule of eating with other people, such that it is a social experience. And when I'm doing it, I'm gonna be doing it while doing something memorable. Yeah. I'm gonna have a conversation that's memorable. So add these rules to it, and it will change your life. You don't have to be on some sort of crazy, subtractive, limiting diet, because those things never work.
Right.
95% of diets don't work. And there's a reason for that too. I mean, we actually understand the neuroscience of how that works, not just the lipid profiles, et cetera, but when the scale's going down, it's the benefit is higher than the cost of not eating what you like. But when you hit your goal, your reward is never eating what you like ever again for the rest of your life. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And so the whole point is you have to change your orientation toward the source of the pleasure, whereas drinking or intimacy with your partner, or what you're actually doing with your eating habits, or if you're going to Vegas, don't go to Vegas by yourself.
Right.
Don't sit in front of a slot machine by yourself. You're hitting the dopamine circuit in your brain again and again and again because you want that pleasure reward.
Yeah.
And it's not going to bring you happiness. It's going to bring you misery.
Well, what is that thing? It popped in my head because we're talking about food specifically. And I remember reading years ago about part of the reason I was for a very long time an emotional eater, and I would binge when I was younger because it was all sorts of
Super
things.
common, by the way.
Yeah.
And the more you go on a diet, the more you're likely to do
Right. And one of the things I remember reading that sort of blew my mind was this idea that part of the appeal of that was that in my head I was doing something naughty.
Yeah.
Like I was like doing something that was wrong, that I shouldn't be doing, and a childhood that was very like a very religious home and like good versus bad.
Rules based.
Right. Very rules based. So what is that when it's not just the pleasure of like, I'm going to drink in it, but it's also like, today was hard and screw the world and like I'm going to do something that's bad because I get to.
Well, part of it is because your whole life is deferring gratification, is deferring your enjoyment for some later date all the time, and becoming so people who are incredibly disciplined, that when they go on a diet, they find that they get to their goal weight. 35% of people, when they get to their goal weight, they keep going, and the reason is because they want to keep getting the reward. They want to keep getting the reward, and 25% of those people develop an eating disorder. I mean, it's like, this is how normal this is. Look, Rachel, there are people listening and watching us right now, and they think they're the only one. They're not the only one. It's you and millions and millions and millions and millions of people who are not talking about it, because there's a lot of shame involved in it, a lot of shame in giving in to the gratification and not being able to live up to your own sense of discipline is the way that it works. And so you have to understand, this is why the science is so critically important. This is not a moral issue.
Yes.
This is a biological issue, is the way that this turns out. If we can understand how basically how the equations work, and then how to remedy it by adding something in as opposed to continuing to take something away. Every time you're taking something away, you're going to pay, because your body's keeping the score.
Yeah.
And it's going to make you pay.
Right.
So don't take things away. Besides, if it turns out that you're pre-diabetic, you should probably stop eating so much sugar. And but that's just medical, right? Is to start adding in people and memory. Adding in people and memory. Add into that, and your orientation toward the source of pleasure will change.
Right. It's funny you say this people and memory thing, because I had this realization recently. My kids were at camp, and I had gotten to go to Ibiza, got to lay by a pool and like be in the sunshine. And
did you like Ibiza?
No. It's not my vibe.
You should have gone to Formentera, which is the next island over.
I love it. I actually was in Spain to do the Camino de Santiago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and got wild hives and edema on my feet and had to stop early. And so I was like, where can we go? Let's go to Ibiza. It was a whole thing. But I'm not a person who likes to just lay by a pool and do nothing. That's not really my vibe, but that's what I ended up doing. And everyone's like, oh my God, are you just living your best life? Are you living your best life?
Yeah.
And I would normally jokingly say, yes, I am. My kids are all at camp and I'm living my best life. And it was the first time that I thought, we say that expression all the time. What actually is my definition of my best life? What's the best it gets for me?
Right.
And I realized the best it gets for me is laughing with my kids on vacation. That's the best.
The vacation is the source of pleasure, the kids are the people, and the source of the laughing is the memory.
Yes.
All three. You got all three. You got enjoyment, and that's the source of happiness.
Yes. So this is I'm like, that's the connection that I'm making right now.
That's exactly
is
why.
That like me by myself, like laying at a pool is never going to be something that's like doing it for me.
Yeah, no.
But when it's all of us together.
Exactly right. And people, when they become addicted, when their brains become habituated to the source of pleasure, they can't stand ingredients 2 and 3. So you find as people get more and more addicted, they become more and more isolated, right? They start getting rid of, like if you're drinking compulsively, it's to have no memories, and you want to do it alone so that you're not distracted from your hobby.
Wow.
And so that's just how insidious this actually is. But once people start recognizing these patterns in their own, and some people will be like, I'll like it less. I'll like it. Yep, but that's what you actually have to do so that you can enjoy it more and actually get happiness and start to eliminate the source of that misery in your life.
Wow. So
each one of these sorts of parts of happiness, this is the happiness science.
Do you feel like, does everyone want to be happy?
Yes, but not everybody knows that. Not everybody acts that way. There's a lot of people who act like they really want to be unhappy, and part of that is because their behavioral patterns are attuned toward getting the attention that they seek or the love that they want by being a victim of circumstances, for example. I know you've written about that an awful lot.
Yeah.
Or by being miserable, they'll have people treat them the way that they think they want to be treated. The truth is that they act like they want to be unhappy, but they deeply want love and happiness. Love and happiness are it's what life is attuned toward. And so therefore what we need is to acknowledge that and start actually trying to get what we want, as opposed to some sort of complicated, weird, twisted strategy to get everybody else, to manipulating everybody else to treat us in a particular way because we're so messed up.
How did social media then play into that? Because I think of like this obsession with everybody thinking that my life from the outside is so perfect.
Right.
Meanwhile, your life is a shit show,
right,
and you're miserable, but oh my gosh, as long as everyone thinks it's great. I remember years ago seeing some influencer on some platform who posted a photo, like a gorgeous photo of himself looking amazing.
Right.
And he said, 30 minutes after I posted that photo, I tried to commit suicide.
Right.
And he had done 2 years of therapy and gotten help and got all these things, but he was like, I remember thinking, like, if everyone thinks I'm great, then that'll be the thing that makes my life great.
Yeah. So that social media plays into all of the biases and fallacies that we live under as human beings. It's almost a perfect strategy for doing everything wrong in your life. So to begin with, Instagram, for example, which has a lot of good things on it. Yeah. I mean, it's like I can look at Instagram reels and just laugh and laugh and laugh because it delivers exclusively funny stuff. Amazing baseball plays and for some reason raccoons doing funny things in people's backyards.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I get. Apparently that's what I like. And Mark Zuckerberg knows that that's what I really, really like. He knows my brain as well as I do, I think. So, but the problem is basically that you're living in real life a blooper reel, and you're looking at at everybody else's greatest hits. And they're looking at your greatest hits and living their blooper reel. And we have an incredible bias in our minds. We have this almost concrete inability to assess what we see and then to filter it with what we know. You know perfectly that this influencer is not living his best life.
Right.
You know perfectly that there's no way you could be living that way and enjoying it. And part of the reason is because you've had a lot of notoriety and have a lot of experiences and you've had your own issues, right? You know, with being super public person and being like, okay, this is public Rachel and now let's get into private Rachel. You know the difference and you know that that's true. I mean, this is human life is the way that this turns out. Fame, by the way, is the only one of worldly rewards that you can only ever be happy in spite of. You want it evolutionarily. You want fame. Because notoriety, where more people know you than you know, is something that evolution is an imperative. Why? Because it helps you succeed in life, rise in hierarchies, pass on your genes, live another day. It's really, really good for you for the evolutionary reasons, but it's horrible for happiness because Mother Nature doesn't care if you're happy. And so people want it, and they get more and more and more and more miserable until they figure that out.
Yeah.
Right? And you've lived it.
Yes.
Not everybody has, right? And they're like, well, fine, guys, let me try.
Right.
Because evolution's pushing you for all of this. Okay, so you can know that intellectually, but you don't quite believe it. Because Mother Nature's so strong with this thing. Mother Nature is so strong. So the real problem with social media is basically this. So there's a neuropeptide that functions as a hormone in the human brain that bonds us together. It's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is incredibly powerful. It's intensely pleasurable. When your first child was born and you locked eyes on your squalling newborn infant, they put him, it's the son, right, on your chest, and you locked eyes, and it's like the 4th of July inside your head, right? That's oxytocin. And every time you see him still, and I get to look into your eyes right now, which is why doing a podcast is so much better in person than it is because of oxytocin.
Absolutely.
Because we get a human link is the way that this works. Now, one way not to get it is social media, because there's no eye contact. It's not in person. It's not even live. That's why it's a really big problem. However, it promises you human connection. You want human connection. When you're starving for human connection, that means you have a Jones for oxytocin. That's what's going on inside your brain. So you go to the most convenient way to get human connection, which promises you all the rewards, but doesn't give you any oxytocin. This is basically like, I'm hungry, so I'm going to go fill up on burgers and fries.
Yeah.
3 meals a day. You can become both obese and malnourished simultaneously by eating the wrong diet that's too high in calories and nutrients. Social media is the junk food of social life, which is why you get lonelier but binge it at the same time again and again and again.
Wow. Oh my gosh, this is tripping me out. Well, and I want to make sure that we come back to one thing because I've taken us like so far over here, which is you leaving your job.
Yeah.
And I know that's a terrible transition.
No, it's
and
okay.
I want to come back to where we were, but I feel like if we get too far from this, the people at the very beginning were like, wait, you had the dream job.
Right.
You had the success story, the thing that everybody is supposed to want, and you took a hard right turn at an age when you're not supposed to reinvent yourself and did something totally different.
Walked away.
Did you get happier immediately or did it take a minute?
Took a minute because I didn't know who I was. When you're doing something with your life and your career, whether you see your identity as mom or CEO, we all define ourselves with respect to our outside circumstances and what we've achieved. That's what humans do. And so Rachel Hollis, author, podcaster. Mm-hmm. No. Daughter of God. Mm-hmm. In relation to family and friends. You know that. But the truth of the matter is that when you're at a party in LA and they say, Rachel, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? You don't say, I'm a mom.
Yeah.
That's not what you say.
No.
Because that's not what people are asking. That is a good answer to the why question, but it's not a very good answer to the what question, and it's not what people are expecting. Okay. So when you abandon that, and then you don't know who you are because you've objectified yourself. Objectification is this funny thing that people do. And there's this literature on how objectification of other people diminishes them and dehumanizes them. And it's a bad thing to do. You know, my dad would say, he'd say, you don't objectify women. It's an immoral, it's a sinful thing to do. God doesn't want you to objectify women. By the way, I completely believe that's true. Mm-hmm. But my dad never told me not to objectify myself.
Ooh.
Self-objectification, no joke. You know, when you look in the mirror and what you see is successful person, hardworking person, mom who gives everything. And you see yourself as a kind of a cardboard cutout of yourself. You become the job title. That's a huge problem because when you finally get up the courage or you become so desperate that you let it go, then you don't know who you are. And you look in the mirror and there's a stranger, and that's intensely uncomfortable. By the way, it's incredibly generative and very important. Those are the moments when you can actually flourish and grow. So let me ask you, you've done that a couple of times in the last 3 years, right?
Absolutely.
Tell me how that felt.
Very difficult. Very difficult. I grappled a lot with whether or not I could still have success if I wasn't the woman that everyone had decided I was, which was married, mother, like filling a certain role. That if all of a sudden I wasn't married, would you still listen to anything I had to say? Which sounds nuts, but you would be surprised how many people were very upset, very, very upset that I made that choice.
Because your marriage failed.
Yeah, because I chose to leave. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of women had sort of put me on a pedestal as like, oh, this is what it is to be a good wife and to stand by your man. And obviously nobody knew why I was choosing to leave, and I didn't feel it was appropriate to say that story. So I really was concerned because I have been the financial breadwinner for my family for a very long time. And I thought, if this all falls apart, who's taking care of these kids? Like, it was so layered for me.
There's a lot of fear.
Oh my God.
There wasn't just
so much fear.
I don't know who I am. It was also just a lot of fear that you might not be able to pay the rent.
Absolutely. And that it didn't even make sense. In retrospect, it makes zero sense. It was all scarcity mindset because, oh my word, like I grew up so poor. So for me to now with this financial abundance be like, what'll happen to my kids? But it was very real for me.
I know that's the key. And you know, the truth is, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
But it's not an intellectual thing. What that is, by the way, is that's a death fear.
Right.
You know, and you're not afraid of actually dying.
No.
You're afraid of your identity dying, of understanding yourself dying.
Yes.
So some people are super afraid of becoming irrelevant or of being forgotten.
Yeah.
Or of being seen in a different way or failing.
Yes.
And people who super high achievers, they always have this death fear of failure because they've never really failed. Or they failed, but but the stakes get higher and they get higher and they get higher. My guess is you have a very strong fear of failure because you've succeeded a lot and you've worked really hard for it.
Right.
And so at
Right.
that moment where you're like, well, that defines failure, given
Yeah.
the image that I've created and the inspiration I've tried to stimulate for these other women. And,
Yeah.
and so that was your death fear. So,
Yeah.
so tell me how you dealt with that.
I have to say that, I mean, I grappled with it for a very long time, and I eventually got to the place where the life that I was living was so untenable that it would have been the death of me to stay in that. It would have been the death of like my soul and my spirit, and that was what eventually drove me to make the choice.
You felt like you had no choice.
I had no choice.
Right.
And I understood that on an intuitive level that I now recognize was
Right.
a lot deeper than I knew. Was like, I have to be healthy and strong because these kids are my priority.
Right.
And if I don't leave, then the whole ship's going to go down.
Right.
And I was also sort of grappling with, and I don't know where this plays into happiness, but my whole life, I grew up without money, real, like
Here in California.
here in California, very passionate about like someday I'm
Right.
gonna, I will never, my kids will never live the kind of life that
You're
I
like
live.
Scarlett O'Hara.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like someday I'm gonna, whatever.
As
And
God is my
as
witness.
God is my witness, I will never go hungry again. And then I had achieved a level of success that so far surpassed
Right.
what I knew was possible. I actually was terrified.
Yeah.
Like I had my foot on the gas pedal to the floor
Yeah.
for decades.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, wait. I don't know how to do this.
I know. There's an old axiom in my business, in the happiness business, is woe be unto the person whose dreams come true. Inevitably, they will find they had the wrong dreams.
Right.
And so what happens is typically you thought, Rachel Hollis thought, if I make it, it's like a sort of stars in your eyes and, Hollywood kind of deal.
Yes.
That's the secret of happiness, is getting all the things that I want, because that's what the world tells you. And you have it in your mind's eye that the achievement of that is going to bring happiness. And then you get there and it doesn't.
Yes.
And so then you basically you can reassess if you have huge presence of mind, or you can do what people typically do, which they say that, I know a lot of very wealthy people in finance. And they're like, if I get $1 billion, it's going to be awesome. And then they get there and it's not. And they're like, I guess I needed $2 billion.
2 billion. Yeah.
And so they think that it's more, and then it's just a search for more for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And they can't. So what happened to you was this incredible good luck, which is that you had an accident. You had a 10-car pileup.
Mm-hmm.
If you hadn't, your dream would have come true, and it would have been unsatisfying and troubling and create problems and havoc in your life, and you would have been like, I guess I need more success.
Yeah, no, I did that. The most successful years of my life, and the podcast audience has heard me talk about this, the most successful years of my life were the most miserable. I
Yeah.
was like, I would make money falling off a log. There was
Right.
nothing that didn't
Nothing
work.
didn't make money.
It was just crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was completely depleted. There was no happiness.
Right.
It was like just propping me up, like trying to keep me going with caffeine and like running ragged and on the road and
Yeah.
not seeing my kids. And I was like, what is this life?
I know.
This is,
And you had no idea how to get out
I
of it.
had no idea
And
how
then
to
an
get out of
accident
it.
got you out of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Not only was now this is in my head, not only was my happiness attached to this success, but all of these employees, like
Right.
this massive company, all of these people counting on me.
Right.
This is a story I told myself, that if I don't keep producing at this level, then they're not going to be okay. Their kids aren't going to have money. It was absolutely insane. And then it just exploded through COVID, through divorce, through all the things. It just exploded. And it really sounds so stupid. It sounds like something someone says on a meme on social media. But like those years of the hardest, like, I don't know how we're going to get through this,
Right.
is why I have the life I have today. Is why I am this person, is
Right.
why I understand that I will never make those choices again for all the money in the world. You could not. If someone said, I will give you $1 billion with a B, $1 billion to repeat 2019 at the same pace. No way.
No way. No, but it actually took the experience of. It's interesting because nobody wants pain, and if in 2018 I had told you what was going to happen in the subsequent years, you wouldn't have taken it. You wouldn't have taken it, but it was delivered to you because guess what? You don't have to go looking for for suffering, it's going to find you.
Right.
And it's going to find everybody listening to us and watching us, because suffering is part of life. The key thing to understand is that when suffering inevitably happens, you got two choices. You can run away from it, you can deny it, you can try to make it go away, or you can learn from it and grow from it. Sometimes you don't have a choice because it's thrust upon you, but then it has everything to do with the experience that we have. I have an exercise I put my students through at the business school at Harvard, that lots of things, good things happen to them, but lots of bad things happen to them. Like all of us, we get rejected in some way, or we feel hurt in some way, or we're disappointed by something. And people say, hey, Rachel Hall's got the perfect life. She's never disappointed. Yeah, right. Like lots of disappointments, even still.
Yeah.
I mean, even when the worst years of your life are behind you for now, suffering is going to find us again and again and again. So, but little things happen. So I make my students keep a disaster journal.
Okay,
right?
tell me this.
Yeah, when something bad happens, you open up your journal and you write the thing that happened that you really wish hadn't happened. And so my students are 20-something, so a lot of that will have to do with the fact that, somebody I was in love with broke up with me.
Right.
A lot of it has to do with that. Or a job I really, really wanted. They're coming out of the Harvard Business School and they're going to be, the masters of the universe, et cetera. And they don't get that job at that investment bank or something. I'm like, you're so lucky you didn't get that job. But I'm 59, so I have the perspective of age for that. Okay, so I'll say write it down in your journal, but leave 2 lines blank under it and put a reminder on your phone that after 1 month you're going to come back and write down what you learned because of that experience after a month. And then 6 months later, you get another reminder to go back and say a good thing that happened because of that. Now, we don't record these memories very well, but when you write them down, it's really life-changing. Because the next time you write something down, you look at the lines above it and you go, yeah, last time there was something kind of like this. I learned something. I learned that, for example, I thought I was going to be sad forever, but I was only sad for 2 weeks.
Right.
And the thing I really got from it was I actually got out of a relationship that was not very functional, and I met somebody else. That was my 6-month thing.
Yeah.
And you start getting much better at predicting that you're going to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And then you start becoming more attuned to learning and growing. This is the way for us to actually see the setbacks in our lives.
Wow.
Because we need them, and we got 2 choices. We can not learn from them, or we can learn from them.
Wait, I'm trying to do the math on this because you said you're 59.
Yeah.
So when did you leave your firm?
55.
Yeah, so this has been 4 years?
4 years. The first 2 years were, so I went back to academia and I started writing, and I had these big ideas and a column and, documentary film.
Yeah.
And these books are going to go really, really great. And it didn't. And then COVID hit and we all went home and all my speeches got canceled, which is more or less how I made a living.
Yeah.
And I sat in a house in front of a Zoom screen in a suburb of Boston where I didn't know anybody. And I had one child at home left, my little girl, who was a senior in high school, doing Zoom school. And me and my wife and my daughter, we were like we felt like we were on a raft outside the Titanic. It was pretty bad, Rachel.
Yeah.
And then it got better.
Yeah.
And then it got better. I learned a lot. I started to surround myself with more people who shared a vision of what could actually happen. And the last couple of years have been, magic in their way. And it's getting better, but it had to crash and burn.
When did From Strength to Strength come out?
February of 2022.
22.
So it was last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that book was an 8-year project, but I didn't know if anybody was going to buy it.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't know if it was going to sell.
So it comes out in 22. It had to be, or I'm assuming, I could be totally wrong, it had to be super successful given what everyone had just gone through.
Yeah. It opened number 1 in the New York Times bestseller list, which is the first time that's ever happened to me.
That's wild.
I have this friend who's huge. She's written, way more best-selling books than I've ever written. And he says, yeah, I remember the first time I got a New York Times bestseller, number 1. And I always thought, it's going to be so great. I'm going to be so happy. And then it happened, and I'm like, huh.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let me try.
Yeah.
And I called him up and I said, actually, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But it was cool for like a week.
Right. And then you move on.
Well, because the list moves on.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
The list moves on. And this is actually one of the great paradoxes of your dreams coming true. And by the way, we're talking about sort of outsized dreams because you've had this outsized life and really good things have happened to me too. But everybody watching us has good things happen to them too.
Yes.
And one of the paradoxes of happiness is that the satisfaction doesn't last.
Law of familiarity.
Yeah. And it's like Mick Jagger says, I can't get no satisfaction. The truth is you can't keep no satisfaction. This is a real tyranny, as it turns out. Now, there's a way around that, but there's not you got to know the science.
What's the way around it?
Well, the way around that is not to have more, it's to want less. So your satisfaction is halves divided by wants. Halves divided by wants. Everybody's remembering their high school math. You can increase your satisfaction by increasing the numerator, have more, have more, have more, have more. Or you can more efficiently do it by managing your wants. By saying, I'm going to want less.
Yeah.
I'm going to want what I have as opposed to having what I want. I'm going to make a list of
what
all
I have instead of having.
Yeah. So you got to manage the denominator. You have to have a denominator management strategy. You got to have a reverse bucket list where you look at all your cravings and stupid ambitions and you cross them out, say, I get them, but easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
Maybe I do and maybe I don't. I'm going to manage that craving so it doesn't manage me, and it works. This is the incredible thing. It actually works. The way to think about that is that you're trying to create this beautiful work of art that is your life, right? Rachel Hollis is a work of art that's not done yet, right? You can think of you as a canvas that you're filling up with brushstrokes, but at age, I don't know how old you are.
40.
You're 40. You look good.
Thanks.
Yeah. It goes by quick. I still feel like I'm 40. That you're adding brushstrokes. Well, your full life is a full canvas. You need a better metaphor for the beautiful work of art that you're becoming, which is more like a sculpture that you're chipping away. For your life to be better, you need to chip away stuff until you find the beautiful work of art that's inside you.
Yes.
Because all this stuff is detritus.
Yes.
It's chisel, 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 get rid of this, get rid of that. And that's the reverse bucket list.
And
that's managing your wants.
Yeah. Have you ever heard Michelangelo talk about David?
Yeah, he talked about that. It's like, and you know, how do you make a horse and rider out of marble? Well, you just chip away all the marble that doesn't look like a horse or a rider, but not so simple.
It really is. This has been such a huge thing for me in the last few years. And to get to this place where I am happy, by your definition. Happier, absolutely, is just removing things, removing. And I have to say, I don't know if it's, I'm lucky in the circle of friends that I have, but most people that I know that have wealth, you wouldn't know because they're content with, they're not chasing new things. They're not buying the flashy. You see the people, whenever I'm in LA, and I'm walking down the street and I'm seeing people in the Maserati or the Bentley or the whatever, I assume that they have the least amount of money of anybody I know. The flashier the thing, the more you need us to know that you've got stuff going on, the less I think you actually do. The more people are putting pictures of themselves flying in a private jet on social media, the less actual wealth I think that they have. Because it's like, if you're like settled in it, if you're not worried about it, then you're not chasing more stuff.
Right.
Like this obsession with I need more.
Well, they think that more brushstrokes is going to make their canvas is dense and full.
Right.
And it's not getting better.
Right.
If you're 75 years old and you're like, I'll finally be happy if I get a boat. I got news for you. But the thing about it is that most of the people watching us, they don't have that kind of good fortune.
Absolutely.
But they're wealthy in lots of ways.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things in their lives that they could actually quite profitably get rid of too. So everybody watching and listening to us could put together a reverse bucket list and think about the things on their birthday that they should not do so they can see themselves more clearly and have a better, simpler, more joyful life. Right. Maybe that's toxic friendships where they always make us gossip and they don't make us feel good about who we are as people. Maybe they're the way that we fritter away our time shopping or looking at social media or whatever it happens to be. There's lots of stuff on the reverse bucket list that every single one of us can chip away. Fewer wants, not more haves.
Yeah.
And look, we're very lucky. We all have things that we wish were different. And a lot of people live under economic circumstances that pinch for sure,
Yeah.
including a lot of people who
Yeah.
are watching us because they're young and their circumstances aren't quite right.
Absolutely.
But we live in a very wealthy time. Thank God. Most people are not missing meals
Right.
from it. And we get into this mindset that more is always going to be better. And for every single person, there are ways in which that's manifestly false, so that we can actually hack the matrix of satisfaction.
Yeah.
So
And
that
I
we
would
can have it
also
and keep it.
say, just from a different perspective, as someone who's sort of hustled my way up into building a business and having financial freedom, that a big piece of that is being aware of what the distractions are.
Yeah.
So you gave a lot of examples like social media, or we talked earlier about addiction, or, numbing yourself so you don't have to feel the things that are happening. I get that. I've done that. I think every human listening to this has some example of like numbing themselves so they don't have to feel what's really going on.
Right.
But when you feel it, you can fix it.
Yeah.
When you feel it, you have an ability to face it.
Right.
And when you're able to, like you said, remove those pieces, you actually get more clarity and more focus on the areas of your life that you can improve. And that includes your financial situation.
Sure.
It's not real and equal for everybody in the way that it should be. It's not fair. But at the same time, I do think that when you are able to remove certain distractions from your life, you're like, oh, here's the energy that I needed to do the things that I wanted to do, to build that business to the next place, to go back to school, to attract a circle of friends that are where I want to go, not where I was. But when we are numbing ourselves or going back to those old things, you don't even realize
Right.
the choices that you need to make because you're just repeating patterns.
Absolutely. It's you're making a very good point about how people will try to not face fear because that's an uncomfortable thing to do today, but it's an unbelievably empowering thing to do.
Yeah.
Just to look right
Just
at
look
it.
at the monster
Yeah.
under the bed. Yeah.
There's this meditation that the Theravada Buddhist monks do in Vietnam and Thailand and Burma. It's called the Maranasati meditation. And
Is this where you imagine yourself decomposing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the 9-part death meditation. And so the monks, is very, very important to Buddhist monks to get rid of the illusion that life and death are fundamentally different. This is part of Buddhist ideology, or Buddhist theology, and it's something that a lot of Westerners don't completely understand, and that's fine. But the whole point is they need to become more comfortable with the concept of dying for lots of reasons. So they'll imagine themselves in various states of decomposition. They'll meditate for 2 or 3 minutes at a time on, okay, I'm a dead body. Okay, number 2, I'm starting to decompose. Number 3 is, worms. Horrible,
Yeah.
right? But it becomes very real very fast, and you will get rid of your fear. So I ask my students to do a 9-part Maranasati meditation on the source of their death fear. So if a lot of it's failure, and I'll say, okay, part 1, you just failed an exam. Think about it. Put yourself in that position. Their blood pressure will rise, Then I say, and I have to admit that things are not going well for me at Harvard. And I'm not sure I'm going to graduate, step 3. Step 4, the job market's going well for my friends, but it's not going well for me. Step 5, I moved back in with mom. Step 6, my parents feel sorry for me. And at that point, they start to cry because they've never done that before. But then face it. And it's funny because that's so important for us to actually make progress. And I was talking about that with my wife, and she said, so what's your death fear? I said, because I'm not afraid of dying. I'm, and it's not even failure per se, although I'm not very comfortable with failure. You know what it is? It's losing my mind. My mother was demented when she was my age.
Yeah.
She got early stage dementia.
Wow.
What happens to me? I mean, this is the whole deal, man. Trust me, I'm not making a living on my looks. It's all about the ideas.
Yeah.
This goes, the whole thing goes. This is my whole identity. That's who I am as a person. And I realize I am terror struck because dementia is, particularly that type, is genetic. And I've been going through life and especially as things build and things build and things build, that's it. And so I started to do that death meditation where I start to lose my memory. And then I start to have unoriginal ideas. And then people start to disregard these ideas. And I'm telling you, I'm not there yet, but I'm getting freer by the day.
Ooh, that's a good. Even when you were talking about the lesson that you do with your kids at school, they're not kids. The students.
Yeah.
I was thinking.
They're kids to me.
Yeah. They're kids to me too. That would be a really good one for my oldest son. My oldest son is the most studious. He did not get it from me. He came into this world like
high achiever.
He's the highest.
How old is he?
16. He's in his junior year. Has never gotten a B in his life, and has wanted to go to an Ivy League college since he knew that they were a thing. And I wish that he would take a year and go smoke pot and travel the world. Like, I actually think that would be the best thing.
The pot part isn't necessary.
Well, I know, but it might be he's pretty high strung. I don't do it, but I was like, I feel like if you were a hippie and you traveled the world.
Who knows what it might do for you. Yeah.
Right. But as you're saying that, I'm like, oh gosh, even him hearing like you got into the Ivy League and it's not going well. You know, you failed a test. He literally had to do a Spanish placement test today. That's where he is right now because his school starts next week. He studied for 3 days. He's in like honors Spanish. He studied for 3 days. He did Duolingo for like 5 hours yesterday to be able to do a Spanish. It's a placement test. It's just to see where you are. And the pressure that he puts on himself.
Gee, I wonder where he got this competitive spirit, Rachel. That's weird.
But okay. Yeah.
It's like a high achievement mentality. That's weird. Do you think it runs in families?
Right. I guess it's just he's a high achiever in a different way than I am. I don't care about school
at all.
The
characteristic is the characteristic. It manifests in different ways with different people.
You're right. So how do I help him?
You help him by actually talking to him about what it feels like to have it not go well.
Right.
And to share the things that have gone poorly for you and asking his advice. This is the thing with teenagers. The best thing to do with teenagers is don't preach at them. Ask them to teach you, and that's how they will learn. So you say like, what's his name?
Jackson.
Jackson, I'm suffering today. I had this thing, and now I don't have it. And there are days when I feel like I blew it, and I know it's stupid because I have all the things that I want. I mean, I have a relationship with you, and my life is full of love, and I have good friends, and I'm a daughter of God. But I feel like a failure today. Tell me what to do. Give me some advice. And he'll start to learn on his own too.
Yeah.
They're great teachers.
He'll probably like fall apart, be like, what?
It's like, my mom's in crisis. No, but he will, it's really good for him and it's really good for you.
Yeah.
Because, look, I mean, it's got to be hard to be your kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I believe it. I'm very hyper aware of that like they each have, Jackson's thing is school. My next son is the greatest athlete. Like he plays every sport. They're all just like, okay, what's my thing? How do I? And I'm like, it's cool, guys.
I know. Easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Easy for you to say. It's like one of my sons, my oldest son, he's a great student. And his mentor when he was going to Princeton, I was talking to him about it and about an issue that my son was having, with trivial now in the rearview mirror. And I said, why is this happening to my son? Where does this come from? And he said, would you want to be your son? The truth is, they model themselves on the values that they see with us.
Yeah.
And so we need to be quite conscious about having the right kind of values and teaching the right kind of lessons. Teach that by the way that we act, among other things. I mean, words are one thing, but actually living these values is critically important as well. If they actually see their parents, if kids see their parents chasing money all the time, it doesn't matter if you tell them that money doesn't buy happiness, they're going to see what you do. It's a really interesting study that actually points this out. There's a bunch of sociologists and psychologists ask this question: what is the best predictor for your kids growing up and going to church? So in religious communities, specifically in Christian communities, because everybody, who's a Christian, a lot of Christians are watching us and they have little kids and they're like, sure hope so, but I don't know what to do. I mean, I can tell them, but is that the right thing to do? So all of the data suggests that the most powerful person, the most powerful adult in their life that they've seen, physically powerful and imposing person they've seen in their life, that person worshiping seriously is the biggest predictor of them growing up to worship. Now, in many cases, that's the father, because the father's the most physically imposing. I remember when I was a little kid, I I wondered if my dad could lift the house, right? It wasn't a big house, and it was funny because my dad was 6'2", and my dad bent the knee to no man, but he was on his knees on Sunday morning, and that had an impression on me. I remember that. And I thought to myself, that's what I want my sons to see too, and my daughter to see too. They all want to see their dad on his knees in church. And that turns out to have had the biggest impression on them too. Okay, so what's the version of that for Rachel Hollis?
Yeah.
For Jackson.
Yeah.
She's got to see my mom is weak before all of these forces. My mom is learning. My mom is vulnerable to these things and is searching for the sources of happiness and truth. And when he sees that, then he'll realize that happiness doesn't actually come from, getting advanced placement Spanish or, getting into Princeton or whatever his thing happens to be, because that's a lure that he'll chase and ultimately find his satisfaction. But once he sees that, how you've experienced it in your life, seeing that, witnessing that, and literally the most successful person he's ever met is you, he will be miles ahead in his own happiness journey.
Well, it's also, I'm thinking about just as a parenting hack, because it's not, I guess, hasn't occurred to me a ton that they're picking it up from me, because I am a high achiever and I push myself very hard, but I don't push them.
It doesn't matter.
They
see you
naturally
pushing you. They see you pushing you.
So this is I feel like a hack for all the parents listening to this.
Totally.
Because
Act the way you want them to be. Act the way you want them to be.
It's real, man, because I cannot, literally, when he was going through the work, they interview him, all the tests, all the things, and then they interview me.
Yeah.
And that has to be one of the funniest conversations that counselor has ever had, because I graduated high school. Like, I don't have, and so this woman's like, so where did you go to? Where was your higher education? Like, what? And I said, I did some acting classes when I moved to LA, the school of hard knocks.
School of hard knocks.
Our colors were black and blue.
Yeah.
But she was like, oh, he really is entirely self-motivated. I was like, oh yeah, I have literally never one time asked Jackson if he did his homework, or it just, since he was a little kid, this is just his thing.
But now you understand.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you didn't go to college. The truth is that you're a super, super striver.
Yeah.
And that's what he's seen is what it means to be a successful adult.
Wow.
Is to be a super striver and a self-objectifier and somebody who doesn't understand herself in the absence of material and worldly success.
Yeah.
And so we've seen, that's not look, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah.
You could do a lot worse. You could say, what it means to be a grown up is to, drink 12 beers a night.
Right.
I mean, there's other ways that, that can go, to be sure. I mean, these are nice problems to have.
Yeah.
But it's serious nonetheless. And if you understand that as you in your happiness journey, you're becoming a happier person by getting off the throttle a little bit.
Yeah.
You got to let him see you doing that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on vacation. I'm actually going to be on vacation.
Yeah.
I am actually going to delete social media from my phone. I'm going to make some changes.
Watch this happen. How much does choosing a partner play into our happiness?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot, because most people are a joint operation. Most people understand themselves best as a reflection of the person that they're spending their life with. Now, that's not true with everybody. I mean, some people can have just as happy a life with a series of close friends, but happiness is love, and love requires other people. So deep, multi-year relationships with somebody, either friends or usually with a romantic partner, is critical to that. So that's important. Now, it's the choosing part is actually not the most important part. It's the developing part. It's what you do with the relationship that you have is more important than getting it perfectly right at the very beginning.
Yeah.
There's such thing as soulmates.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
You make a soulmate. You don't find a soulmate.
Right.
Magical thinking is dangerous for romantic relationships. I write about this a lot, and this is the unit of my class at the Harvard Business School that my students like the most, because they want to build the enterprise of their lives, and the center of that is accumulating the currency of their startup life, which is love, and they don't know how to do that. And when you're in your 20s, it's mysterious, and especially so today. You find people in their 20s are a third less likely to be in love than in the 1980s when I was in my 20s.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
really?
Yeah. The likelihood of marriage, of cohabitation, of romantic partnership is declining.
Why is that?
It has a lot to do, it has a lot to do with the technology and the way that we find mates.
Yeah.
Dating apps are not as good as in-person markets, as they say.
Right.
But we also have just a lot of fear. We have kind of a fear-based culture where people are afraid of each other, where we're told that everybody is sort of threatening to you and dangerous and, look out and be careful, et cetera, et cetera. And I get that. I want my kids to be safe as well. But the way that I raised my kids is meet people in person and pair up.
Yeah.
Because happiness is love, full stop. Which, my 25 and 23-year-old sons are both married.
Yeah.
And my, I suspect that my daughter will get married pretty young too, because that's really, really one of the great secrets, but you have to know how it works. I take my students through the neurophysiological process of falling in love. There's a very practical reason for that. They're all going to be business leaders, and business leaders are in real danger of falling in love with the wrong person.
Why is that?
Because if you have a sexual relationship with somebody at work, you're going to lose your job.
Oh, right.
And so
Yeah.
they're going to be executives.
Yes.
And it's like, woe be unto you
Yes.
that you do something in the workplace and wind up
That's
getting
that.
fired. And it happens constantly to the smartest people.
Right.
Like, you're so smart. How can you not know
Yeah.
that having an inappropriate relationship with work is going to ruin your job? You made it to the corner office and then
Yeah.
you blew it by having a
Yeah.
relationship. And I show them how the brain falls in love and how to intervene in that process. But I also show them all the ways that they can actually intervene in the process of falling in love and staying in love and being in love. They'll give them the highest likelihood of having a partnership that will give them enduring happiness.
Are there characteristics in a partner then that are crucial? Because
Yes.
the one that I always think of, especially if you're talking about your kids finding love really early, is growth.
Yeah.
And I heard someone on a podcast the other day. It was like kind of like a bro sort of podcast, and I actually thought it was so sweet. They were talking about how important it is that you have a partner who grows.
Right.
And the guy was saying
With you. Grows with you.
grows with you. But I actually thought it was a beautiful example that they gave. They're like, they don't have to grow. They don't have to be interested in the same stuff you're interested in.
Right.
They have to be interested in growing in their own way.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, if someone's like really into like, I don't know, MMA or whatever, they're just like, they get really into martial arts.
Right.
And they want to learn and they want to move up and and they're so passionate about it. And like, they don't have to be interested in your small business accounting firm, but they have to be interested in their life evolving.
Right.
That's where we sort of miss it, is one person's evolving and the other person is exactly who they were when y'all met. And at least I feel like that's the crucial piece, is like, we both have to be growing as people.
That's true. I mean, you don't want to be with somebody who's stagnant.
Right.
And people who are stagnant are not happy. And being with somebody who's unhappy, they will almost certainly project their unhappiness onto you, and then you will become the problem. And if you're growing and they're not, then that asymmetry is lethal to a relationship. But there's two things that I find that people get wrong. That they think one thing, but the truth is the opposite in terms of the characteristic of their partner or their relationship. Number one is that people think that the objective of a marriage is passionate love. That's exactly wrong. Passion comes in the beginning of a relationship, and there's a certain amount of passion that you have all the way through a successful relationship. But the goal within 5 years is companionate love. Now, it doesn't sound hot. Yeah. I know, right? But companionate love means your goal is deep friendship with that particular person. And what you find is a lot of people will get together and they never develop a friendship. And when the passion starts to wane, they realize they don't even like each other. I mean, everybody watching us has had that kind of experience before. So the key is, can this person be my best friend? And then develop that best friendship, which takes a few years. You don't become best friends with somebody after a week.
Yeah.
You don't even know that person. Part of the passion is that you don't know the person very well at the very beginning of a relationship, and it's exciting. Yeah. It's an adventure. But when it's not an exciting and not an adventure, you need something that's actually more enduring. The goal is actually having lots and lots of oxytocin, which you get from friends, which you get from people, your intimates, your people, it turns out. That's number one. The second big mistake that people make is they're looking for compatibility. And it turns out you need a very low baseline of compatibility with a life partner. So there's certain non-negotiables. So if you're a strong Christian, you want another person who's a strong Christian.
Right.
If you need to live in Austin, Texas, because mom and grandma and the entire family is there and you're committed to that, then okay. But this is a very low baseline. Politics is not an area that you need compatibility in, unless politics is your religion, in which case you belong to a terrible cult. Get out now, right? So what you really need is baseline compatibility on a very low level, and then tons of complementarity. You need to find somebody who's excitingly different than you and who completes you.
Yeah.
Now this requires a lot of sort of a giving spirit, right? But introverts need extroverts.
Yep.
That's what you actually need. You need people whose personalities fit and whose ideas fit because of the difference, not because of the sameness. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big problems with dating apps. Dating apps sort on compatibility and not on complementarity. They rule out difference. So people put in their dating profile, I want somebody, because we're all, you want to date the person in the mirror.
Right.
And so it's like, I want somebody who votes like me and who likes this kind of food and who, thinks that Sriracha is neat and Austin's awesome and likes this kind of music. And you wind up describing your sibling. Yes. That's really not hot. And so what do you need to do? You need to actually start sorting on complementarity. It's like, surprise me.
Yeah.
That really works. And it turns out that the happiest marriages, baseline compatibility, super complementarity, and then these people who learn to see their differences as a source of strength.
Yeah.
That's a really, really great thing.
What if you're listening to this and your marriage is unhappy, your relationship is unhappy, and you want to get back to the place where it feels really good?
Yeah. Usually when there's a lot of different reasons that's happening. That there are a million ways to be unhappy in a relationship.
Let's say we've just sort of like slowly fizzled. Yeah. There's no passion there anymore. Nobody hurt anybody. It's nothing that drastic. We've just sort of lost the passion for what it was.
The most important thing in any relationship is treating it with a conscious seriousness like you would anything else. The worst way to make your unhappy marriage happy is just hoping it gets better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I sure hope the weather gets better. I sure hope anything else. I mean, it's just this helplessness that people actually feel, or saying it's only going to get better when the other person is doing this, is actually the other person has to do something. That's assigning your happiness to outside circumstances.
Yes.
The smart way to do it is, if you have a problem in your business, is to say, we have a problem in our business. What are we going to do? Is to get together with the center of the enterprise of your life, which is your partnership, and say, I think we have a problem. What are we going to do about it? Now, maybe you go to therapy or something, but actually that's not necessarily even the best way to do it, is to start saying we, us, and not I and you, and I hope for the best, and you bore me, etc. And say, I think we have a problem, and I think we ought to solve this problem, and I think we can. And start talking about it openly. And for a lot of couples, it's the first time they ever have. That doesn't work for some people, but it works for a lot more people than they're actually going to think. It was a really interesting set of research papers on this, that shows that the single thing that you can do if you're at odds. So, couples that they're fighting a lot, they're quarreling a lot, they don't understand each other very well. An analysis of people who are fighting destructively always finds that they use I and you pronouns. Couples that fight, and my wife and I are 32 years married, and we fight all the time. I mean, she's from Spain. My wife's from Barcelona, which is, in Spain, fighting is just like a normal form of communication. Right. So, which was hard for the first 5 or 10 years of my marriage, for sure. But the thing is that she always fights saying, we need to do this. We need to solve this problem. We have an issue. She never says, you do this and you do this and I do this and you make me feel this particular way. She says, we have a problem. She's incredibly collaborative in the way that she fights with me. And that makes our fights into something that are projects.
Yeah, it's us against the world, not us against
Well, they lead to
each
progress.
other. Yeah.
Because everybody's got problems. And then when you have a fight, and by the way, when you fight that way, this is a really interesting thing that you find about a lot of couples who can fight right. That doesn't mean they like it. It doesn't mean like, oh, let's go have a fight because it's so fun. That's when they're incredibly intimate. That fighting can be this enormous source of intimacy, because you say things that you really think but you haven't said before, and it's raw and it's true. And you talked about we, and you feel so incredible. When you do that, you feel so incredibly close to your partner that it's magic, actually.
Yeah.
That's how couples at odds can actually torque the situation and make it better and make it into something that's good. A lot of people think if I don't have any conflict, that'll be better. Wrong. You don't need to fight less. You need to fight better.
Yeah. I want to talk to you for 7 more hours. I really do. I want you to hang out here all day. And you like can sleep on the couch. And
this is the best podcast studio. I have to say, this is the only podcast studio that smells as good as it looks.
That's what we're going for. We're
I
going
love
for
it.
good
I'm
vibes.
telling you.
But the reason that I reached out to your team originally is because I loved From Strength to Strength so much.
Thank you.
I feel like everybody needs to read it, particularly people who are, let's say, 40 and over, because it's this conversation about what are you going to do after you realize that all the things you were chasing weren't what you should be chasing. So I want to make sure that I say that before we end.
Thank you.
But
I wrote it for you, Rachel.
Thank you. It's just for me. But you have a new book coming out with an unknown partner that no one's ever heard of. No, you got to write a book with the Queen.
The Queen, Oprah Winfrey.
Can you tell me how that came to be?
Yeah. So during the coronavirus epidemic, I was writing this column in the Atlantic every Thursday morning called How to Build a Life, about the science of happiness. And I don't know who reads it. 500,000 people a week. Great. One of them was Oprah Winfrey. And she was, locked down in her house in Montecito, California. Everybody was locked down. And she was reading it, and she would look forward to it on Thursday morning. And then From Strength to Strength came out, so she read that. And so she said, I think I want to interview this guy for my podcast. She calls up and says, this is Oprah Winfrey. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm Batman. Right.
She called.
Somebody
Okay.
called. She didn't call my house, and I picked up, but
That'd be such a move, though.
I know. She's awesome like that, by the way.
Yeah,
and so we collaborated on her podcast, and then did a couple of other projects, and it was like a house on fire. It was just like we see the world in just the same way. It's just we do it differently. She's had this mass audience that she's brought toward ideas that she has actually found the purveyors of those ideas and gotten people in front of them and translated big ideas for her audience. So she's a translation mechanism for a massive group of people, which is why people love and trust her, justifiably. And this is what I want too. And so we thought, and she said, if I still had a show, you would come on the show 30 times, and that would have gotten you into the public zeitgeist or something, right?
Yeah.
But I don't have a show anymore, so why don't we do a book where, we'll talk about it together, and then you'll introduce the science, and we can talk about how it works. And so we did that. And so over the past 9 months, we've been writing a book, sending chapters back and forth, talking on the phone, talking by text, which is a lot of, because she's moving around a lot and I'm moving around a lot. And it's been magic.
I bet.
It's been magic. We cooked up the whole thing in her tea house in Montecito, which is surreal.
Yeah.
Because everything she touches is beautiful.
Yeah.
Everything she touches is beautiful. And one of the interesting things is that it's very easy to be cynical about, people who have that kind of position in society, that they have a curated public image and they're not like that. Oprah is like what people think.
Absolutely.
You know her too.
Yeah. She is the only celebrity I've met that, and this is impossible because there's nobody I love or admire more in my whole life. Like since I was a little girl, I watched her show every day. She's the only person I've met that is better than I hoped she would be.
She's authentic and true. She's funny and nice.
She's not human. Has evolved to some level that is not. I don't know how to. It's like ethereal, and I sound insane when I say it.
No,
she's just special.
She's authentically amazing, and it's been a great experience for me to get to know her and to collaborate creatively with Oprah and learn from her. And it's a book called Build the Life You Want: The Art and Science of Getting Happier. And I hope it touches a lot of people, and it brings the science and the ideas in a way that people can understand really clearly and really easily and apply it to their own lives. And most of all, what Oprah and I wanted with this book is to make people into happiness teachers. Because the way that you learn the happiness science is by reading about it and applying it to your life, but then sharing it with other people. Because teachers are the ones who absorb the materials the most. And so we want to empower as many people as we possibly can to become happiness teachers. And maybe let's create a happiness movement. Yeah. People who are having a rebellion of love in a society that doesn't have enough of it. We kind of have ambition, I have to say, about this. And you know what, we're at the time of our lives, Oprah and me and a lot of other people, where I think we can afford to do that. We can afford to think at that kind of scale and not worry so much about, the impact that it has on each one of us individually. So I feel very privileged for that. And I'm really grateful I got to be able to do that, and looking forward to having people enjoy the book.
Yeah. Arthur, thank you so much for the
Thank
time.
you, Rachel. Thank you for your work.
Oh my gosh. I hope you will come back every time you guys are in LA.
I would love
you have
that.
something to promote. Let's continue the 7-hour conversation.
I would love that.
This was awesome.
Thank you.
We did it.